be talking about is conflict resolution. I grew up in a household that I didn't learn how to have, I learned how to have a lot of conflict, but I didn't know how to reach a resolution. I believe my parents would have done better if they could have, but they were both very sick people. So I watched my mother and how she dealt with problems when she took drugs, prescription drugs, and she drank and laid on the couch. And then my father would rage and get violent, and so I watched, and there would be problems, but there would never be a solution. They would, finally my dad would go off and be gone 3 or 4 days or whatever. So I really never learned how to take a problem to a resolution stage until I got to a 12-step program. And I felt like when I found the 12 steps, it was like a parenting process for me, or reparenting. So I'm going to talk about how those of us who are in recovery, and if you're not, and you don't need to be, well, just thank God. But for those of us who do have any addiction, it is most important for us to stay out of conflict to the best of our ability, particularly early on in recovery, because it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of time and focus to recover. And so the best thing for us to do is to not, get into a lot of conflict. And, we live in a world where there is conflict. And so it's important, I believe, that we know and talk about it. And I want to hear from each of you how you deal with conflict and how do you get to resolution. And so I'm just going to give you some things that I think has worked for me in that. And I will tell you, I had so much rage from my father. I carried his rage. And so before I found recovery, I just loved to find somebody that disagreed with me about anything. It didn't matter what it was. That I could argue with them till hell froze over, and it wasn't really about finding a resolution or a solution. It was about getting a charge, getting a high almost out of discharging that anger and that rage. I'm not proud of that. When my children were small, my world was pretty narrow because I was a stay-at-home mom. But when I'd go to the grocery store, I yearned for that checker, and I mentioned this before. I really wanted her or him to make a mistake so I could throw a fit in rage. And I have walked off and left 2 full baskets because I would rage and then I'd get embarrassed and I'd leave. Got to where my kids wouldn't even go to the grocery store with me, or didn't want to because I embarrassed them. So by the grace of God and a lot of good therapy and the 12 steps and wonderful sponsors and, some hard work on my part, I'm no longer a rager. I can enter conflict to the best of my ability. I don't want to get into conflict. I don't look for it like I used to, so I can have the release. So I want to talk about how to get from the problem or from the conflict to resolution. One of the things to think about is that when 2 people are having conflict, to remember to keep the problem between the 2 people. It's not the person. It's not the people that are the problem. It's the problem. And so if 2 adults can come together with a problem that needs to be solved and not, blame the other person or, and so get and another thing, before you enter any kind of conflict resolution, it is best to get your feelings out of it first. And the way you do that is you talk to, if you're in a 12-step program, by all means talk to your sponsor. If you're not, talk to someone that you trust and run it through the other person and let them help you see, maybe, another point of view. But get your feelings out of it to the best of your ability, and particularly those of us that have any kind of addiction, because it's the feelings, the unresolved feelings that we get uncomfortable with, and it will tell, our brain, well, I know how you can feel better, you can go take a drink, you can eat, you can do this. So it's important for addicts, we have to live a little different type of life than we did, or for me, that I did before, because those are the things that would take me back to the food and the heartbeat, in the bulimia. Because bulimia is about overeating and then purging, and when you purge that rage and that anger out. So, the number one thing is get your feelings out of it first before you go to the other person. And like I said, talk to a sponsor or someone that you or that you trust, because it's not about going and gossiping about the other person. It's just about running it through someone first. And then the second thing is to listen to the other person. And listen not only for what the other person is saying, but listen with the feelings in which they're saying it. If the other person has a lot of feelings into whatever that conflict is, listen to that, because you're going to learn a lot about that person through as much about the words that they say as the feelings. And so have a listening for each other. That is the best gift that we can give each other, is to have a listening. And so when you have a listening and you actually listen to the other person, and then, of course, I work in treatment, and so, we really encourage people to mirror back what you heard, because sometimes we don't even listen to the other person. We're just waiting for them to stop talking so we can talk. And so we don't even hear what they're saying. We may act like we're listening, but we're just figuring out what we're going to say, after they say what they say. And so it's about really having a listening for the other person, and really listen, with how they're delivering whatever they're saying. And then what that'll do is it will make the other person be more open to listening to you. And like I was going to say, it's this age thing, my memory kind of goes. Anyway, there's Jackie. We haven't seen Jackie for a while. Good to see you. I do have ADD, but anyway. Okay, so it's about when you are listening to someone, actually listen to them and mirror part of that back, so they'll know that you heard them. And how you do that is, what I hear you say, and say the high points of what you heard them say. And I really hear, and you might even say, if the person's crying, you might even say, I see your pain, or I see your anger. And validate that other person. That's going to but that's going to help that other person to have more of a listening for you. It's about letting your armor down, your guard down, and making the conflict, making the resolution more of that's the number 3 thing. Make conflict resolution a priority. You have a conflict, but making a resolution, coming to a solution, a priority rather than being right. Driving down the street and someone pulls out in front of you, and you have a feeling that you just want to run into them. Well, you can run into them and take a chance on, being in a wreck and maybe even dying in that car wreck. And so when you do, what we'll put on your tombstone is, I had the right of way. always being right is not the best way to get to a resolution. And so be respectful of the other person's viewpoint. The older I get, the more I see how little I know. And what little I know, sometimes I can't even remember. So, but it's amazing when we can listen to people, hear their point of view. Sometimes, we have tunnel vision. It's just our way or the highway. We can have blinders on and can only see our way. But when we can listen to another person and watch their demeanor, watch how they're delivering their, whatever they're saying, if they have some pain with it or some anger, that's going to tell you a lot about that person. And like I said, and be respectful of their viewpoint, because you might learn something for them. You might get some information about the situation that you didn't even know. And a lot of times we can make our decisions about some sort of conflict without having gathered all of the facts. So that's another thing, is be respectful of the other person's viewpoint. And then number 4, and I see this all the time. I just came out of Family Week, been doing 2 days of Family Week, and what this number 4 is focus on the present. Now in Family Week, we do go back and we look at the past, but when you're in a conflict with another person and you're wanting to find a resolution, stay in the moment and what's going on and happening in that moment. And don't drag up all that unresolved stuff in the past, and because it will impair the decision for the moment. It'll impair everything. When you drag that stuff up in the past, there is what you're going to do is assign blame, and and the blame will always, not always, but what we want to do is put it on the other person. If they'll just listen to what they did to us years ago, blah blah blah, we feel justified in what we want from them today. So when you have a conflict with the person and you're going to them to try to find a resolution to it, stay in the moment. Stay in what is the conflict this moment. And that takes practice, and that takes some maturity. And that takes, I believe, to invite God into what you're going to say before you walk into that arena with the other person. Invite God into it for yourself and for the other person, that you will have some discernment of what you need to say before you say it, and that focusing on the past. And we can do that, I think, more probably with, if we've worked for someone for a long time, or if we have family members that we have conflict with. It's usually in long-term relationships where we know the people and they know us, but we have a conflict with them, and it's very easy to go back and drag up all that old stuff. Well, do you remember when? Do you remember? No. And that's not a way to ever get to a resolution about what the present problem is. And then another thing, and I'll speak, like I said earlier, addicts have to be very careful. This next thing is pick your battles. Pick your battles. Life is too short to fight over things that do not matter. I live in a little town of 463 people, and we're getting ready to have an election. Well, you would think it was a national presidential election. We've got a mayor that's running for re-election. He's 92, and we've got a woman running that's in her 80s. And anyway, there can be conflict in a little bitty tiny town like this. And, those two people are both my friends. They're good friends. And so we really have to pick our battles, and what, there's a part of me that really, because I used to serve on the city council, and there's really a part of me that wants to really get in there and really argue and do this and say that, and you know what, I don't have the energy. And so this is about picking your battles, because conflict can be draining. It can drain you. Now, if there is something that is so important to you that you're willing to have, to talk with someone about the conflict, can get to a resolution, go for it. But know that it is going to take energy, time and energy. And do you want to spend that? Is that matter that important to you? If it is, give it your all. If not, you might want to say, how important is this? One of the things that my husband used to say is 100 years from now, what difference will it make? 100 years from now, and then he would laugh about it. So it's about, and going back to being an addict, we must be very careful about the conflict that we enter into. If we're going to get out and, be a demonstrator and get on those streets and, and I'm all for that if that's what you want to do. Or anyone. If you want to take a stand for something, or what I always say, if we don't stand for something, we'll fall for anything. But as recovering addicts, we have to be very clear about what we're standing for and be willing to suffer the consequences of the criticism. And if you can, accept the criticism about your behavior, you better stay out of that playing field, because it's that conflict and the stress and the energy that you put into conflict that will take you back to your substance every time. And, and I'm not saying that addicts are weaklings. We're not. We're not weaklings, but we just have to err on the side of caution. And when in doubt, no. We have to really do some soul searching. Is it this problem, whatever this problem is it that important for me to give that much time, energy, and attention to? So if it is, go into it and work with the other person about the problem till you get to a resolution, and be willing not to have it your way. If you go in, thinking that you're going to get your way about everything, you're going in to lose. So reaching a resolution is a give and take, So, if you want to waste your time and energy, find battles to get into. But, do you really want to? And choose your battles carefully. So another thing is to be willing to forgive the other person. At the end of the conflict, win, lose, or draw, whatever, do you reach a compromise? Do you get some, things that you want, and the other person gets some things that they want? That is what good resolution is. You both come out winners, but you've got to be willing to give up something in order to have that balance. You can't always have it your way. And so at the end of it, be willing to for forgiveness. Forgiveness of yourself and forgiveness of the other person. Now, if this is conflict that's been going on for years and years, and there is a lot of damage, emotional damage to you or whatever that's been done, and you'll have a lot of feelings about it, what I recommend is work that through with someone else before you go to the person that you've had conflict with, or having conflict with. And so when you have when you're reaching a resolution, just remember to forgive yourself and also forgive that person. That person might have done more to you than you did to them. And, forgiveness is not about forgetting. You may not ever forget exactly what they did to you, but what you're saying, you're willing to give up the hurt even the word hurt, I want you to think about it. When you say, you hurt my feelings, that sounds pretty manipulative, you know. But when you can stand with another person face to face, nose to nose, with the problem between you, and you don't see that other person as the problem, and they don't see you as the problem, you can end that conflict with a mutual resolution and leave there with forgiveness in your heart for that other person, and like I said, with forgiveness in your heart for yourself. And that is how, you know, forgetting, and like I said, forgiving, like I said, is not always forgetting, but it's being willing to let go of the problem. Sometimes we will hold on, we'll chain ourselves to something while all the time we're asking the other person to let go of us. We'll chain ourselves to the problem while all the time we're asking the other person to let go. We get something out of conflict or we wouldn't stay in it. Now, if you want to live healthy and not have stress-related illnesses, what we must all learn to do is to have a conflict, but take it from the conflict stage to the resolution stage, and know that you can end up with two winners. You know, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, but you have to be willing to give up something, usually. And so another thing is using humor in conflict. Now, I'm not saying to laugh at the other person, but if there is, usually the things that we get our feathers the most ruffled about when we get upset about something, a lot of times doesn't amount to a hill of beans. When something's happened to us, many times in our mind's eye, we'll go back and gather up stuff that maybe our parents did to us. When you have, and I've said this before, when we have big feelings about something, like when you're having conflict with another person and you have great big feelings about what they've done to you, you know, majority of the time, when you've got big feelings, what we say, if it's hysterical, it's historical. So you've got all the way back and picked up stuff in your childhood or all along your life where people have done you wrong, and you're bringing that into that present time of that conflict. So, you know, the other person really doesn't have a chance, because they're not only trying to find a resolution with this moment, but all of your unresolved conflicts of the past. So going back to humor, if you can find something humorous about the situation, and that can create an opening for huge discussions. And it, like I said, it's not about laughing at the other person. It's about laughing at or finding something humor about how two grown adults have put so much power into this conflict that, you know, it could be ruining relationships between husband and wife. It could be ruining a relationship between parent and child. You name the relationship. If there's a conflict there, if you don't find a resolution, it can harm those relationships. So what I'm saying, if you can get your adult on board enough to listen to the child in you, you know, and be a little childlike and find something humorous about the moment. And when you do that, it will break the ice, and you can, for the other person, and it will bring down their defenses, and you can better talk about the problem between the two of you and find a resolution. So by no means are you laughing at the other person. You're just finding some common humor in the situation. All right. So one of the things in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, this comes out of a chapter out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's called the marriage chapter. And out of the new print of the big book, it used to be on page 449, but I want to read you this. A lot of you know it. A lot of you know it by heart. Some of you are new and you don't know it. But this is on page 417 in the new edition of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what this man was talking about, he was a physician, and he was a bad alcoholic. And he got sober, and his life was working for him in every area but with his wife. He could find more fault with her. She could not do anything right for him. And so he wrote this chapter about his alcoholism, but more than that, about his relationship with his wife and how he had to take off his glasses and start looking at his wife through a different pair of eyes and see what attracted him and what drew him to her when they first met, when they were teenagers. Because through the alcoholism, he had grown to hate her, but really dislike her and put a lot of blame on her. So I want to read to you what this recovering alcoholic wrote. And this I can stop in the midst of anything. If I can remember this passage, it can help me through, or has helped me through a lot of things. So it says, and acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I am disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me. Isn't that what conflict is? We find something unacceptable about that other person. And I can find no serenity until I accept the person, place, thing, or situation being exactly as it is supposed to be at this moment, right now. Accept that person just the way they are at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. Until I could accept my alcoholism, I could not stay sober. Until I could accept life completely on life's terms, I could not be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as on what needs to be changed in me and in my attitude. So we're going to have conflict. We're human beings. People get on our nerves. We get on their nerves. Somebody does something. We don't like it. And so we're going to have conflict. But there has got to be a way to do it and get to a resolution where both parties come out with their dignity intact and in this acceptance. This acceptance has helped me, like I said, through many, many situations. And remember, if you are a recovering addict, you have a lot of tools that normal people do not have. Now, I will tell you, there are people, Christian people, religious people all over this world that have the same answers. They just came out of a different book. The book of Alcoholics Anonymous, majority of what comes out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous comes out of two books of the Bible in the New Testament, James and Ephesians. If you really want to know how to live life, that's how you live. And those two books out of the Bible, James and Ephesians, and a lot of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous came right out of it. And the reason the big book is so helpful for addicts is because a lot of addicts have had spiritual abuse or religious abuse in their childhood, and the last book that they ever want to read is the Bible. So thank God this big book is not in conflict with any religious teaching. It goes right along with religious in the biblical teaching. So that's what I have on conflict resolution. I never knew how to solve any problem until I got to a 12-step program. And it is by the grace of God that I found a 12-step program and got willing to work the steps. And I have to every day stop in the midst of any problem and ask, what is my part in this? And how important is it for me to get into this conflict in order to have my way about something? So Anyway, that's what I have. Let me hear what you have. How do you solve problems? We've got some wise people, all of you are, but I know, some of you have worked through a lot of issues in your life. Give us some feedback and talk about, or if you have a conflict that that you're trying to find a solution for, well, put it out there and let's talk about it. Who wants to go first? I see a hand up.